Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Welcome back, friends. I'm Bryan Zelmer, Director of KU Presents at Kutztown University, and I'm here with my friends, Josh
Benson at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center in Marion, Illinois.
Kevin
Maynard, Quad City Arts, splitting the border between Iowa and Illinois.
Katie
Miller, Midland Center for the Arts in Midland, Michigan.
and Danielle
Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
This week I had a conversation with singer Lauren Jelencovich. And before I get into that, I, like every week, have a question for all of you. Have you ever gotten a phone call or email or had someone just show up out of the blue that you weren't expecting, and that resulted in something, I won't say life-changing, doesn't have to be that big, but just something that you didn't expect out of the blue that had some sort of impact?
Absolutely.
Tell us, Kevin.
I think we all had that same phone call. We got a random phone call.
So you get to say it first since you brought it up.
Yeah. Got a phone call from Christine Cox that resulted in flying to Florida like a week later to participate in a summit that I had no idea what it would turn out to be or who I would be with, except for Josh. And then all of a sudden, a year later, I have a podcast and I have new best friends.
And to add on to that, at least two of us thought we were being punked.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And to clarify, I was not given a week's notice because I was like alternate number 3 and I only had 2 days notice.
But it was clearly fate that all those other people couldn't go or said no, and that you joined our group, because it just absolutely would not have been the same and this wouldn't exist.
Yeah, we're so glad you were the 6th choice.
Might have been the 8th choice. I don't know.
I got a phone call out of the blue from my current employer, Midland Center for the Arts, saying, "Are you interested in a job?" And that was absolutely not on my radar. I was very happy at Interlochen. I was doing my thing. And that was a Tuesday. And by Friday, I had accepted an offer. And we had moved to Midland 6 weeks later. So if that's not also life-changing, I don't know what is.
Nice.
So I was playing Danny Zuko in a production of Grease. We were in one of our final dresses. And you would think that the director would actually be paying attention to the show at that point, but she pulled me aside out of the rehearsal and she was like, "Hey, do you know anybody that would be interested in being tech director at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center? They're trying to find somebody and couldn't." And I was like, "Yeah, me." Like, what? I called the next day. The day after that, I went and interviewed and they hired me on the spot. 3 months later, I was executive director.
Wow.
It's been 17 years since then.
Yeah. Similarly, I had been interviewing with different people at the Wolf Trap Foundation for internships as I was like getting ready to graduate college. And as I was leaving a class one day, I got a call, and it wasn't offering me an internship, but it was just asking me if I knew that there was also a full-time job available in the education department. And I did not know that. And they were like, "Well, maybe you should apply for that too." And I was like on it. And I think I had the application in like later that day or early the next day. Another phone interview, and then 2 or 3 in-person interviews after that. I moved to Virginia 2 weeks after graduation, and it's been, I think, almost 15 years that I've lived here.
Wow.
I don't know if I had a specific picture of where my life was headed, but I don't think it was like have a house and twins in Virginia.
Well, Kevin stole mine, but I do have one other time where I was at football practice and out of nowhere, the U.S. Army showed up and abducted me. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And that was kind of life-changing. So true story. Anyway, Lauren had a call out of the blue that changed her life in a good way. And it was a great story. And I can't wait till you hear this. So here's my interview with Lauren Jelencovich.
My name is Lauren Jelencovich, and I am a classical crossover artist, and I've been touring the world with Yanni as his featured vocalist for 13 years, and that's a little bit about me.
Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's really great. And we'll talk certainly about working with Yanni and all of the things that you do in recent times. But I want to go back to find out how you started in the arts in the first place. Can you just maybe give us some of the highlights, the key moments along the way?
It's kind of been a part of my life for a very long time. So I started singing at a really young age. I had my first solo in the 4th grade, and it kind of gave me the bug.
Do you remember the show?
I do. It was a Christmas concert at my school, and I did not want the lead role. I wanted a very small role that had the best song, and that's the role I got. It was called Dr. Newhart's Christmas Cure. And then since then I had been, singing in choirs and whatnot. And then I won a contest when I was in high school called Ed McMahon's Star Search. That's kind of when I was like, oh, maybe I can do this for a living. And so I explored, going to school for singing, and I wanted to study classically.
That was the impetus of you starting to think about it as a career.
Yeah. I had been doing things around the town that I grew up in, and professional concerts on my own at a young age, but it really wasn't until that show that I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of do this, I think.
This is real, yeah.
So it was really kind of cool. And of course, I had watched the show when I was a young kid. I used to pretend to be on it. And
I did too, but I never had the guts to actually audition for it. So.
Well, you want to know, my dad actually was like, I heard that they're doing auditions for Star Search. And he was like, I'm taking you. And I was like, all right, let's go.
Nice.
And so that's kind of what it was. But and so then I auditioned for schools. I went to the Manhattan School of Music, and I really wanted to come to New York City and be on Broadway and try that scene, and studied opera. But I was always able to do these different genres of music, right? I feel like I had many voices. And so that's kind of what I continued to do.
How did you determine the Manhattan School of Music in the first place? How did that get on your radar?
Well, I went to a few different places. I ended up getting a voice teacher when I was in high school, and he was like, you have this freakishly high voice and you can sing classical music. And I was like, what? I don't know. My parents are not classical musicians at all.
Okay.
Did not grow up around it at all. Just music in the house. And my grandmother played the piano. So he was like, you should really look into, if you want to do this, you should study classically and you should go to a conservatory. And I was like, okay, that's frightening. I ended up just looking at a bunch of different schools, and I did do the tour circuit of the schools. I went to Berklee College of Music. I looked at Boston Conservatory. I looked at Juilliard. I looked at Curtis. All these places, right? And a lot of them I didn't really want to audition for. That was sometimes I picked up the phone and I was like, I don't know, they were kind of rude, so I don't even want to bother, And so it was a very small list, and I really, really wanted to go to New York City. I was obsessed with it.
Where were you growing up?
I grew up in Florida.
Okay.
I grew up in Florida, in West Palm Beach, Florida, a little town.
Had you ever been to New York City before?
I had. That's the thing. My dad's family lived here in New York City, and so we were always coming up. And then and every time we came up, I was always like, let's go see a show. I just I was obsessed with it. It was So
what was the audition like?
The audition was crazy because I was like, oh, I guess I need to learn some arias to audition for these schools. So I took a lot of prep work for that. It was months of work. And along the way, I was also preparing the same material for competitions and different things. I finally, came to New York City, and it was so stressful. I was really nervous because it's your one shot. And I was like, and if it doesn't work, what am I going to do? Because I had a very small list of things. And then you see them sit there and they're all looking at, and it's okay, sing this one and sing this one. So I think I did a couple of arias, did Glitter and Be Gay, Bernstein. And then I did a couple of art songs was also needed. Mm-hmm. And then of course I threw in on my list of repertoire, musical theater and pop stuff, just because why not? And I ended up getting into every single place I auditioned, which was amazing.
Congrats.
And I had full scholarships to Berklee College of Music, which is a completely different type of school. And same with Boston, and the Manhattan School of Music gave me a scholarship, but not as big as the other ones. And I was like, I want to go to New York. and that was it, and then I came here. So
I definitely do want to talk about how you deal with the nerves, and we'll get into that in a minute. But first, I just want a little more of your schooling, if you can.
Yeah.
Manhattan School of Music, if you had to just pick one main thing that you got from your time there that you still lean on today, what would that be?
At Manhattan School of Music, I felt a little bit different, right? Like I felt like everybody was very classical. And so when I first got there, all of the, some of my, fellow students in my grade were like, oh, you're singing this aria, right? And I'm like, I don't know that aria at all. Like, they're like, well, that's totally your repertoire. Like, you need to be doing this and you need to be doing, and I was like, I literally speaking words in different languages that I had no idea what was going on, So I felt like I had a little bit of catching up to do, because these are people who had been like clearly working on this their whole life, like classical music. And there was a very small, at the time, musical theater department at the school, but it wasn't a department. Okay. Now it's like this, now the school has branched off and they have a couple of, 2 different schools or whatever. But when I was there, it was like a class that you had to audition for.
Okay.
And so I really wanted to be in it, because I wanted to be able to do it all. I don't want to just stick to that classical route. I mean, it's great, but like I've obviously branched off a little bit more since then. And the other stuff was a part of me too. So it was a little bit different. And I think that having the teachers that were supportive of that. And then there were some that were not, So I did still musical theater stuff. And then the opera thing ended up doing, I had the typical opera circuit. You would do these young artist programs. So it was Opera Theater of St. Louis, certain things. And it was shortly after that. I think I did that I think that was in 2010. And so that was the year that I ended up getting this call. And in between these opera things and these other concerts, because I do a lot of corporate and private events and solo concerts, which then led me to what I'm doing all over now, which is basically my show. So I'd get part-time work here and there, restaurant jobs. I worked 3 restaurant jobs at a time, and then I was doing babysitting gigs on the side. I worked at a cocktail, I was a cocktail waitress at a billiards hall, I've had all these wild jobs.
Survival jobs.
So I remember getting a call right before I went in. It was right at the beginning of the shift. I knew that they were going to call me, and I walked into the cocktail bar, the billiards hall, and I was like, at 6:00, I'm taking a call. I'm very sorry, but I have to walk out and I have to take this call. And they were like, that's totally fine. There's nobody here right now. And I was like, great. And they're like, why do you have to take this call? I was like, Yanni is calling me.
Okay,
and they were like, what?
How did that? Yeah, let's start from the beginning of that story.
I was like, this is the beginning of the story.
That's the beginning of the call. But how did you know this call was coming? How did that happen?
Because I got a message and they had heard me sing on YouTube, and they were like, are you able to take a call? And I was like,
oh, wow.
Oh my God. Yeah, I got this call and they were like, hi, Lauren, we've seen some of your videos and we think, you would be a really good fit for this. And Yanni's looking for a soprano. And would you be able to record some songs that we're going to email you and just record them sometime this week? Very much just record them sometime this week and email them. And I was like,
oh my God.
So I didn't really know what the process was, or I was thinking, okay, all right, this week I'll do it. I can do it this week. That's no problem. Sure. And so then, and I had never listened to Yanni at all.
I was going to ask.
But yeah, I know. But my parents knew Yanni, and
Sure.
I knew, I obviously knew Yanni. But if you were going to tell me, oh, can you please tell me and pick out a Yanni song? I would have been like, doesn't he do the British Airways commercial off of the Lockmay duet? That's all I knew.
Do you know if they had other people doing this too, or did they see your YouTube and say, we're pursuing this one and seeing if we can make it work?
I have honestly no idea. I know at the time they were bringing in some other violinists, or I think there were a couple things that were open, and he was about to go back out on the road. And so they sent me the songs and I listened to the songs and I was like, all right. So I listened to them on my way home. It's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning is when I finished my shift. And so this was on Halloween weekend. Okay. It's a crazy time in New York City. Don't do it. Anyway, so I got home. I listened to the songs. All right, cool. Next day comes. It's a Saturday. I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to work at 6 p.m. that night. And everybody that knows me knows not to call on Sunday morning, because I am working until 4 a.m. And so all of a sudden at I want to say 7:45 or 8 o'clock in the morning, I get this call that following Sunday. And I answered it because it actually was the same area code as where I have, because Yanni lives 25 minutes from where I grew up, apparently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so and so I guess it was the manager, and he's like, hi, Lauren, this is so-and-so. And we just want to if we could fly you tomorrow morning to Florida, do you think that you'd be able to come and sing for Yanni? And we'll get you back to New York City whenever you need to get back to New York City.
Wow.
But like, you know, because he's already heard your videos and he actually like loves you. And can we fly you tomorrow morning? And I was like, yeah, like I'm a yes girl. Like I'm like super like whatever, sure, no problem, let's go. And I was like, okay, now I have to like learn these songs now. Like it wasn't like, okay, you can listen to them and get them in your system. It's like, no, you need to learn these right now. I flew to Florida and they picked me up in this car and then they drove me down to Miami and they had me fitted for in-ear monitors, which, you know, is used in performances in a lot of different halls, but a lot of arenas. They had you fitted for
it without even... Yeah. Like you think you're going to an audition and like that's really unusual.
Yes. I mean, those custom in-ear monitors cost thousands of dollars to make. Right. And so I was like, did I get it? Like, is it happening? You know, and no one could really, you know, tell me because I wasn't seeing Yanni that day. I was seeing him the next day. So the next day rolls around and so I go and I sing for Yanni and he was like, this is great. This is great. Okay, now I'm going to give you some blocking and you're going to do this, you know, when you walk out and when you do this. And I was like, all right. And we're like in his studio. So it's not like a stage setup, you know, it's like really like you're in a recording studio, basically. That's like a house on his property. And so I was like, all right. And he's like, okay, great. And we're going to Puerto Rico. We're going next weekend. And I was like, okay. Oh my gosh. Did I just get like, all right. He's like, now go home, rest and, you know, and that's, you know, and we'll see you tomorrow because, and then I was leaving that Wednesday. I had to get back. I was doing this masterclass for the Metropolitan Opera and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get back. Like, so they flew me back on the Wednesday. And so I sang one more time for him on Wednesday. And then that was it. He's like, okay, we'll see you in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
And then that turned into what, 10 years?
13 years.
Around the globe.
Around the globe. And so from like, it obviously has changed, you know, we've done, I don't even know how many, like 7 world tours and I've done 3 PBS specials. And so originally I was only singing like 2 songs at the end of the concert. And then one day on tour, we were in San Francisco and he was like I warm up backstage, you know, and like it's squeaky and high and like I'm sure you know, like we're weird people. Like we can pretty much sing anywhere and we don't care who's listening or whatever. But then sometimes we're really self-conscious. So it's a mixture of two. And so he was like, what is that? I have a gerbil backstage. And I was like, that's actually like rude, Yanni. Like, don't call me a gerbil. Like, and he was like, get out here. How high can you sing? Like, let's talk. And I was like, I mean, I can like comfortably sing a high A above high C. Like that's
really high. It's really high.
Yeah. Like for opera stuff, I'm singing Queen of the Night or like, you know, The Doll and Tales of Hoffman and a bunch of different high stuff. So I was like, I mean, I can comfortably sing pretty high. And so he's like, okay, great. Sing this melody. And I said, okay. And so I sang this melody and then he's like, okay, now sing it up the octave. And so I sang it up the octave and it's like this beautiful, and so I sang it and he's like, great, we're going to China. And I was like, at this point, I like, you know, I was like, what? You know, every time we do something, I feel like incredibly blessed and lucky. And like, I'm always like freaking out, right? Like, I just think it's the coolest thing ever. And so I, you know, there's never a day that goes by where I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so old. I'm going to China, you know, like, no, that's not what it is. So he's like, we're going to China. I haven't been there in 15 years. And I wrote a song specifically for China. It's called The Nightingale. And you're going to sing the part of the Chinese flute. So, and I was like, okay, like, what does that mean? You know, like, so he's like, come down to Florida. We're going to write a vocal line together. And I was like, okay. So went down to Florida. I recorded and wrote this vocal line with him for this song called The Nightingale. And apparently I'm the only one in this, like, has lasted in the studio that hasn't cried, like, for 9, like it was a 9-hour day, you know, and they were like, you're the only one that hasn't ended in tears. And I was like, really? But okay. It was so fun. I had such a blast. And at the end of it, he was like, okay, great. This is going on my opera album. And I was like, it's like one thing after another. And I'm like, I don't actually know what you're saying, but what? And he's like, yeah, it's with Placido Domingo, Renee Fleming, Rolanda Villazón, and you, and Catherine Jenkins, and and like all of these like names that I've heard my whole entire life, like that I've listened to and seen. And I was, and I was like, okay, that's crazy. and it happened. And so then he kind of coined me the Nightingale. So now every time it's like, Lauren Nightingale Jelencovich. Somebody was like, you should just change your name to Nightingale. And I was like, I don't know about that.
That's a great one.
I mean, Jelencovich is really hard to say. So
I want to go back to, you mentioned about your nerves before.
Yes.
You just went through a whole story of all these different moments that I'm sure the nerves really came up.
I would get really nervous on a normal basis, but I have to tell you, within a week, that all of that happened, I had 2 rehearsals with the orchestra in Puerto Rico, and it was a concert for 18,000 people. And it was this huge arena in Puerto Rico. And I was like, oh my God. But let me tell you, I have never been so I just had like a wave of confidence roll over me right before I walked out on that stage. It was a weird feeling, and I don't know. And obviously since then, like other things have come up, and I of course get anxious here and there. But like that moment, I don't know what it was. Was it adrenaline? Was it me just being like, no, like I had this moment like right before because they open the curtains and I walk out, and I had this thing of like, this is it. And I am not going to mess it up. Like, it's going to go. I mean, I didn't tell anybody I was coming to Puerto Rico. I didn't tell anybody I got this. Like, because I didn't know what it was. Like, I was like, it's my first concert. I don't want to tell anybody.
So you get back and you're like, oh, how was the weekend, Lauren? Oh, I performed with Yanni in front of 18,000 people.
Yeah, like... Well, so this is really funny. So throughout these like opera trainings and whatnot, I would do these young artist programs and trainings all over. I went to Israel for a month. I was in Montreal for 3 weeks, Puerto Rico for 2 weeks. So I know people in Puerto Rico and I have friends there. And it just so happened that like a friend was at that concert. How wild is that? Like so somebody actually did witness, somebody that I know witnessed my very first concert ever with Yanni, which I felt like is so special. And so in that moment, I felt oddly calm. And I don't know what that was. There have been moments of that since then, but that moment in particular, the first one, I was like, this is it. Yeah. But, performing on a regular basis, you never really know what is going to happen out in the audience, right? And in every time, I mean, it's live, so everything is a different energy. And I think that's what I love about it too. So yes, I get nervous and I really try to calm myself, of course, like I do all my rituals or whatever.
What are your rituals?
Okay, this is going to sound really weird. I have to crack my toes before I walk on stage.
Okay.
Isn't that weird? I mean, like, I don't know.
Not the weirdest one I've heard, but...
Really? Okay. I was like, I'm surprised. And I usually like to, just breathe and certain things. I do certain things the same way every time. I don't know if that like helps calm me or whatever, but like I've got to crack my toes before I go on stage. But it gets you in the
zone. It's your routine, and I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
And so, there's that, and just being prepared, and obviously like the little bit of anxiety that you have. I mean, you're always going to have that. I channel it and I use it towards it. In the end, the moment I step out there, I'm like, hi, okay, people, we're going to have fun. So I do try to like make things more on like a personal level. And I think that helps. But, I can only be me.
That's cool.
And that's what I have to remind myself of. And so anxious or not, like it's me.
That's awesome. You now perform your own show. And you're going out, you're a self-represented artist, is that correct?
Yes, and I have a little help here and there, but mostly self-represented, yeah.
That's how you and I met. We met at a conference called APAP in New York City.
Yeah.
I finally got to see one of your showcases, and it was wonderful, and I loved it, but one of my favorite moments was when you sang O Mio Bambino Caro, because it reminded me, my grandmother was a professional opera singer. I didn't know, obviously I wasn't born when that part of her life was happening, but she taught me about opera, and and some of the things that she loved.
Wow.
And her Puccini was her favorite, and that was one of her favorite arias. And so like, I just, whenever I hear that, I think of her. But anyway, I really loved your showcase. But I want to get into your business model. You know, you're out there performing as Lauren Jelencovich. How do you get your musicians, all of that stuff? Because as an independent artist, that's all on you.
It is. And it sometimes can be a little overwhelming.
Oh, I bet.
So like, you know, definitely different. I feel like I have different roles to play, different hats, I guess you could say. I don't know how
Can you just go through a list of a few of them? Because I'm sure it's like booking, it's negotiating. Everything. Yeah, all of that.
Exactly that. It's booking, negotiating, PR, marketing, all the social media management. It's contracting people. It's the flights. It's the, you know.
You do all of that. You haven't hired anybody to help you.
Yeah, no. I do for like flights and other things. I do end up, using my family owns a travel agency. So sometimes I'll be like, hey, can you just look at this? What would be the best route to get there? So that is a little helpful for sure. I've written all of the contracts. Everything is me. All the marketing stuff. I do it all on my own. All the design. So, and it's not easy. I mean, I think some people are like, wow, it's so easy for you. And I was like, actually, like it's sometimes hours just researching how to move this image. Like I am not a Photoshop queen. I don't know how to do all of that. I'm like, I just want the background to be gradient. Like, and how do I do that?
Your materials, from a presenter's point of view, your materials are beautiful. They catch your eye, and they I think they do a good job selling you. So basically saying what you are and what what your show is going to be about. So you've learned something along the way.
Thank you so much. That means a lot because, I want to try to be able to make it look like it's me. So, and represent myself.
And your color choice is always what pops out at me because you have such great, vibrant colors that stand out and they work well together. It's not like, just some obnoxious, like loud colors.
Thank you very much. I mean, I feel like if I didn't sing, I feel like I would like this like branding and marketing thing. I think that's actually kind of cool. And so I definitely love when things look uniform, and I have a little bit of an eye for things. So
the graphic design stuff, it sounds like you research on how to do it, and you kind of have a natural eye for it. But what about all these other business parts of it? How did you learn? Did you have many mentors? Did it just through trial and error?
Well, like when I was younger, so I would do all of these shows and private events and corporate stuff. And actually my parents at the time were really helpful. After I won Star Search, I ended up working with a gentleman. His name was Lyle Walker, a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful man, mostly in the country scene. Okay. And he was responsible for finding like Leanne Rhymes and stuff. So, and he was so wonderful. And he was definitely a mentor. He has since passed away. But like, I learned a lot, I think, from the business when I was younger. And I think that I had people that kind of like helped guide me along the way. Of course, like there are some times where you have some not so great deals that you come across, as every artist may. A lot of people end up going through, unfortunately, and you learn from that, and try not to do that again. But it is what it is. So I feel like I wasn't totally like blind to it, but a little bit. It's research is basically what I would do. About
how many years have you been doing your own thing now, like promoting your own show? Was it before the pandemic or since the pandemic?
It was before the pandemic, but really kind of took a leap like during the pandemic, really. Like that's when I was like, oh, I guess I could like do that. Like that's when I first started to sign up for conferences.
How did you find out about the conferences in the first place?
I have been because I had friends that had done showcases or whatever. And so I never really quite understood like at APAP, like I was like, okay, I get it. But like, well, I never actually knew that an independent artist could really do it. I knew people who had representation that was doing it. And I never really knew that there was this conference that like, people go to and that's how they book shows. And I was like, wow. And so somebody was like, well, you should do that. And I was like, all right, yeah, I should, because why not? That's basically what I'm doing anyways, just not on a larger scale. So if I can get myself in front of more people, that's just more opportunity, and why not? And that's kind of when it started. So my very first APOP was actually the online one, like the one during the pandemic. And I, designed things for that. And I didn't, it was a weird way to start because I feel like a lot of people, it's a community and I feel like you meet a lot of different people. It's networking and in person is like such a great thing.
Very different experience.
So I didn't really know how it would have, like how it worked out while I was, online, but it worked. And I had a great, little season that, that I was like, oh my gosh, okay, like, I take it all as like a win, right? Like, I mean, anything is exciting. Even if I got nothing, it was still good. But obviously the goal is to book things. Of course. But like, but I was like, and I really loved it. Like I was like, oh, I'm writing to people and I like talking and, and it's just fun. So last year was the very first year that I did APAP in person. And I was like, all right, like I'm going to do it and I'm going to go all out. I'm ready. Like, let's do it. And that's what I did. I did, I designed all the postcards. I wrote to everybody. I did my same marketing emails and, all of that and tried to do that. And I think, I love it.
Great.
It's an investment for sure. And so I think that's the hardest part is not having like a team of people or like, it's really all on my own. But going back to like the other business side of it, I did last year for APAP, I signed up since I was a first timer in person, I signed up for a mentor.
Okay, great.
And I was mentored by Lisa Rock.
Nice.
And could not have been a more perfect fit, and she's fantastic. And she does a lot of it on her own, right? So it was so perfect. And she really just like brought me under her wing and was like, this is what you need to do. Call me if you have any questions, I had no idea I needed to get a huge freaking sign, right?
Booth,
like I had no idea. And I was like, all right.
Lisa's great. I've known Lisa for a few years and you have a good mentor. That's all I can say. She's amazing.
She was great. And so from that, every time, and I go and I rely on these people. So sometimes if something comes up and I don't know the answer to, I'll reach out to Lisa. Hey, da-da-da-da. Or I talk to another friend of mine. Hey, da-da-da-da-da. Just like certain questions, you communicate and you kind of get a lay of the land.
That's what's great about our industry. There's so many sharing people.
Yeah.
Of course, there's exceptions, but for the most part, there are a lot of really wonderful sharing people in this. Lauren, we're running out of time, but I need to ask you a couple of questions that I have to do. I have a time machine. I'd like to bring you back to right before you sing for the very first time in front of Yanni in person. Is there any advice or any kind of encouragement or anything that you'd want to tell yourself?
Make sure you stay present and to just really be yourself and rely on what you already feel inside. And not trying to be, I need to just remind myself to be me and bring what I have to that music.
It's amazing to hear you say that out loud because that's almost the same words that I tell myself in the last year or so. If you go back and listen to some old episodes, Oh
my gosh, okay. Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah, like that's what I would tell myself. Calm and be you and really don't try to be anybody else.
Great advice. Speaking of advice, is there any kind of advice or any pieces of wisdom that you've learned along the way about the business that might be helpful for a student who's about to enter the industry or a new colleague coming from a different industry? Is there something that we didn't talk about that you think could be helpful that you've learned?
Just have the confidence to do it. Like you can do it. It seems sometimes a little overwhelming, but you can do it. Have faith in yourself that you can do it. You're going to shine through no matter what, It's funny. I want to touch back just quickly on the mentors because after I worked with Lisa, I did Max this past fall, and I was partnered as a mentor with Robert Baird, which also was very helpful.
Canada,
and he was so kind. I feel like maybe I want to sign up to be a mentor,
That's how it starts.
Because I had a friend. Because a friend of mine was like, I'm doing APAP this year. And it was really because of what you said and how, we talked about it and your experience and what you were, because we had dinner together through a mutual friend and they were like, this is what, I want to do it. And it was because of what we talked about. And I literally spent as much time as I could trying to help her with different things. And I knew that it was stressful if you've never actually even been to it. right? So it was really quite fun to, be like, okay, this is it. This is the dimensions you need for this. And this is what you're going to use. And you're going to order through this company. And, I really loved that. So I just had to put that out there.
Just do it. Turn that advice around to you.
That's
what happened to me. It was like my third or fourth APAP when I was approached and asked to be a mentor. I'm like, oh, I've only been there for 3 years. Like, I don't know anything yet. And I'm just so glad I said yes, because in mentoring people, you learn about yourself as well. And it's just, and you're building your networks. And so I've done it ever since. It's really a great experience. So
that's so cool. Like next year, if like a lot of the time I'm hoping, I'm hoping I don't get booked. No, like that's so weird to say, but it's like, I hope I get booked, but also like, I've allotted the time frame to try to not accept work during that time, because I really love the whole experience. I love going to all of the different talks. I love seeing the different showcases. I love meeting people. I'm a people person. It's a lot of fun. And I think that's one of the best things about it is the people.
Well, Lauren, thanks for taking this time to sit with me and have this conversation.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for thinking of me to have me on. This is so cool. I've listened before. So I was like, that's great. It's a true honor. Thank you so much, Bryan, really.
I need to start us off with the fact that she is a girl boss. She is doing everything to make this enormous career happen. And like we can't just sweep that under the rug. Like social media and booking and contracting and touring, those are all completely different skills. And I love to celebrate and I love to hear about all of these strong, amazing women in the arts.
Agreed, Danielle. I loved this conversation with Lauren. I was so impressed by everything that she has achieved in her career. And, starting out winning Star Search, like how do you even get to that point as a young child? But I thought that was really amazing. And then just her trajectory and then using all of these other skills to build out her own show and a name for herself just beyond the Yanni connection, right? So she really does have a reputation and is doing her own thing aside from kind of this affiliation with another really famous artist, which I think is really amazing.
And just the energy that she brings to it. And you can just tell that she's excited about what she's doing, loves what she's doing, and is still very humble, even given the success that she's had.
Yeah, it's awesome to see somebody doing what they're clearly born to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes somebody special to spend 9 hours in a studio and still leave it just being like super jazzed and excited.
She's always so present and appreciative of what she's been offered in life and the opportunities that she's had. And she's just always so joyous. And there's even a video of her and Yanni backstage because he gets a kick out of how when she gets so excited and happy, she kind of sings instead of talks. And it's just, that's how she is. She's so bubbly and happy and joyous. And it's just very infectious being around her.
I really liked her advice for herself in first be present and then be yourself and have confidence in being yourself and let that take the lead. I love that advice that leads as an artist to just be genuine.
I also really like the fact that her first advice was to be present, because I think a lot of times we spend so much time like thinking about what is coming next and thinking about what is the future that like without living in the present, like you can't have that joy and that excitement and really appreciate the things that you have right now and the really great moments. So I really liked that.
Bryan, you mentioned how appreciative Lauren is of the opportunities. And that really actually, I think, did come through in your conversation around mentorship and conferences and her mention of Lisa Rock and Robert Baird. You could tell how grateful she was for the time and energy that they spent with her and helping her get set up for success with conferencing. And then she wants to now turn that around and be a mentor herself and provide that knowledge and that support to other artists, which I think is really wonderful and indicative of the type of person that Lauren is. I also thought it was really interesting, and I was so glad to hear that she found success with the online conference in the online APAP conference, right? So she clearly knows how to have a presence in both a physical space and a digital space. And I think there's something for us to think about there as we move forward and kind of technology continues to change and expand, and we're going to continue to interact in different ways. How do we take maybe some lessons from Lauren and how she took advantage of that opportunity and translated it into actual business for herself, even kind of like in the worst moments of our industry.
I also can't stop thinking about the calls that change our life that we just talked about, and thinking about getting a call from Yanni's representatives and like, what, a week later?
She didn't even have a chance to record the songs and send them in. Like, if that is not the craziest like showbiz story I have heard, I don't know what is.
And just like always say yes. Always answer the phone and always say yes.
To your point, Danielle, saying yes and being open and willing because you don't know where opportunity is going to lead you. But also, like, I think it just speaks to her talent because they clearly already pretty much had decided they were going to hire her for this gig before she even set foot in the studio with Yanni, right? Again, being yourself, being present, letting your talent speak for itself is a big lesson to take away from Lauren's story.
Yeah, they fitted her for in-ear monitors when she showed up. That process, literally, the custom in-ear monitors, especially at that time, were $1,500 for the pair. That's not a cheap thing. And to do that before they've even told her that she's got the job, they had obviously decided.
So I want to thank Lauren for sitting down and talking with me. I've always enjoyed our time together, and I love running into her at conferences because just seeing her smile always lifts my spirits. And I hope you all got something out of this talk with her, and we'll catch you next time on There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Bryan Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh, wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
Oh, actually, Bryan, before we wrap up, I was really just thinking, I feel like you need to expand on your phone call story from the beginning. If I could just...
I love that you dropped like the premise of that story without any details. And it's so like, what the
But it's got Claire Danes and Bill Pullman. Last time I checked, they weren't.
Have any of you seen Claire Danes when she showcased at APAP?
I've never seen Claire
Are you
Danes.
serious?
What would she have showcased?
Singing?
Claire Danes, the actress?
Yeah, she was singing. This was a while ago.
Does she sing?
She did.
Sounds like it.
I don't know. I must not have gone well.
I was going to say it went really well.
You know what? I see my error. Taylor Dane.
That's a big difference.
Also, very different.
Totally different.
I remember that.
It just clicked.